People have been struggling with distraction for 2,500 years. It can't be because of social media and iPhones, etc. There has to be a deeper psychological cause. And the people who are indistractable, they're going to own the future, while everybody else is going to be some zombie moron who's just consuming whatever media companies want to send them.
If you ever struggle to stay focused, balance competing priorities, or simply get out of your own way, this episode's for you. Today, I sat down with Nir Eyal, best-selling authors of Hooked and Indistractable. Nir shares why mastering focus in our distraction-filled world is the skill of the century. We dive into the psychological roots of distraction, their transformative power of time boxing, and how small habits can lead to big wins in relationships, productivity, and personal growth. Why Indistractable is the skill of the century?
Yeah, so I think there's so much information out there that, frankly, that used to be the problem. Like, well, our parents and grandparents could have complained that they don't know what to do. But today, the big problem that we have is not that we don't know what to do. Who doesn't know that if you want to get in shape, you have to eat right and exercise? We already know that. Who doesn't know that if you want to have better relationship with the people in your life, you have to stop using your phone all the time and be fully present with them? Who doesn't know that if you want to succeed at your career, you have to do the hard work that other people don't want to do? We already know this stuff. That's not the problem. And if you don't know it, Google it, right? All the answers are right there at your fingertips. So the problem is not that we don't know what to do. The problem is that we keep getting on our own way. We keep getting distracted. So that's why I think becoming indistractable is the skill of the century, because it doesn't matter how much amazing information you can access online. I mean, basically you can learn anything you want, you can watch anything, you can digest all the world's information. But if you can't focus long enough to turn that information into wisdom, it's as if you didn't process it at all. You're just a dummy because you didn't have the time and attention to process that information and turn it into wisdom. So whether it's your mental health, whether it's your physical well-being, whether it's your career, everything today depends upon your ability to focus your attention. And that's only going to get more important because I think the world is splitting in between people who allow their time and attention to be controlled and manipulated by others. And we know that's only going to continue, right? Products are only going to become more engaging, more habit forming, more sticky, more entertaining. And those who say, no, I will decide how I control my time and attention because I am indistractable. And the people who are indistractable, they're going to own the future, while everybody else is going to be some zombie moron who's just consuming whatever media companies want to send them, as opposed to the people who are smart about it and use these tools to serve them as opposed to us serving the tools.
What inspired you from writing Hooked, one of the most popular book in product management, into focusing on distraction in Indistractable?
Yeah, so I wrote both my books, and I'm writing my third book for me. I mean, it's great that my books have sold 1 million copies and that people enjoy it. That's wonderful. It's very gratifying. It feels amazing. But if I'm totally honest with you, Mahmoud, it's the fact of the matter is I write my books for myself. When I have a problem I need solved, I think about it, I talk to my wife about it, I talk to friends about it, I research about it, and most of the time I can find the answers those ways. But once in a while, maybe once every 5 years, I come across a problem that I just can't solve myself. And even after I read all the books about the topic, it doesn't fix the problem for myself. So when I wrote Hooked, I was looking, I had sold my previous company and I was looking to start another company, and I knew that the secret of success would be the ability to bring users back. And that's definitely been proven right over the years since I wrote Hooked. But at the time, I couldn't find such a book. I literally looked around. I couldn't find a book on how to build habit-forming products. So I wrote the book. That's what the book is titled, Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And then with Indistractable, I found that I had this problem of distraction. That it basically started one day with my daughter. The inciting incident was I was with my daughter one afternoon, and we just had some quality time to spend together. And I remember we had this book of activities that dads and daughters could do together. Do a Sudoku puzzle, have a paper airplane throwing contest, all kinds of fun little games. And one of the activities was to ask each other this question: that if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember that question verbatim, but at that moment, I thought it was a good idea to just let me just check my phone real quick for a quick minute. And by the time I looked up from my device, she was gone, because I was sending a very clear signal that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And she went and left the room to go play with some toy outside. So if you ask me today, what superpower I would most want, I would tell you it's the power to be indistractable. That is the most important skill of the century. And so that's when I really realized I had to figure this out for myself, because it wouldn't just happen with my daughter. It would happen when I was at work and I would say, oh, I'm really going to focus on this big project and get all the things done. And then somehow 20, 30, 45 minutes later, I was checking email and scrolling Slack channels and doing all the stuff other than the big important project. It would happen when I would say, "Oh, today's going to be the day I exercise. Today's going to be the day I work. I eat right," but I didn't, and I wouldn't. And so I noticed that increasingly that was becoming a problem. I wasn't doing what I said I was going to do. And when I read everybody else's book on the topic, frankly, they all kind of said the same thing: stop using technology. Well, thanks a lot, but that doesn't really work, right? Like that's like telling someone who's overweight, stop eating food, stupid. Well, like, thanks, but that's not really practical. Today, we have to be connected with these devices. It's not practical to say, I'm going to stop checking email. That's like the kind of advice only a tenured professor could give. Real people can't just stop using technology. And why would we want to? Technology is awesome, right? Like, you're in the UAE, I'm in Singapore, we're talking over this platform for free. It's amazing, it's magic. And so we have to figure out how to use these tools in a way that serves us. And so that's really what I wanted to learn. And it turns out that this excuse that technology is the problem is silly. It's just not based in any fact, because people have been complaining about distraction forever. Plato talked about this problem 2,500 years ago. He called it akrasia, the tendency to do things against our better interests. So it can't be, if people have been struggling with distraction for 2,500 years, it can't be because of social media and iPhones, etc. There has to be a deeper psychological cause. And what I discovered was that psychological cause of distraction is much more interesting and much more empowering than just blaming it on our technology. And it actually fixes the problem as opposed to just blaming whatever device happens to be in our hands.
I always blame either my phone or TikTok and Meta, because a lot of smart engineers working day and night just for me to scroll, or either blame my girlfriend because she's very distracting. But you mentioned something very powerful in the book, which is distraction comes from within. What do you mean exactly by that?
Well, let's back up a minute. What is distraction? Let's get our definition straight, just so we know what we're talking about here. The best way to understand what distraction is to understand what distraction is not. What is the opposite of distraction? Most people tell you the opposite of distraction is focus, but that's not exactly right. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. It's right there in the word, traction and distraction. They're opposites. Both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action, reminding us that distraction is not something that happens to us. We like to blame social media. We like to blame our girlfriend or our boss or our kids. We like to blame the stuff outside of us. But by definition, distraction is an action that you yourselves took. Okay, it is an action that you take that pulls you away from what you said you were going to do. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do. Things that you do with intent, things that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite, distraction, is any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, further away from your goals, further away from your values, further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So those are acts of distraction. So the difference is one word, traction and distraction. The difference is intent. As Dorothy Parker said, the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. So there's nothing wrong with going on social media. There's nothing wrong with watching Netflix or playing video games or doing whatever you want to do. Let's stop blaming these technologies. They're wonderful. They're fun. Like, what the hell are we complaining about? These products are so good, I want to use them all the time? Like, that's what they're supposed to do. Or even, hey, Netflix, stop making such interesting shows. I like to watch them too much. Apple, your devices are too user-friendly. Stop that. That's stupid. We use these products because they're fun. That's the point. And we shouldn't complain about it like little whiny babies. We should learn how to use them better. And we can use them better by starting out by planning when you're gonna use them. Is this rocket science? Do we have to think that technology is hijacking our brains, that we're all being controlled and addicted? No, you're not addicted. You're distracted. So all you have to do is plan the time for traction. Ask yourself, what are my values? Right? If part of your values is to have fun, is to enjoy yourself, is to relax, then there's nothing wrong with watching Netflix or YouTube or whatever you want to do with your time, but do it on your schedule according to your values, not the tech companies. Okay? So you can turn any action into traction by planning time for it. We can talk about exactly how to do that and how to plan time for everything that's important to you. Work, play, family. We can talk about exactly how to do that. That's actually not the hard part. The hard part is that we don't actually realize when we're getting distracted. So let me give you a perfect example. For years, I would sit down at my desk and I would say, oh, I've got this big important project to work on. Okay, nothing's going to get in my way. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not going to, I'm not going to lose focus. I'm just going to work on this project. I'm going to get it done. Here I go. I'm going to get started. Nothing's in my way. But first, let me just check some email, right? Let me just check the news. Let me just scroll LinkedIn, or let me just look at the Slack channel or whatever, because I'm doing my work. It's part of my profession. I have to check email sometime today, so I have to, right? It's part of my profession, right? I'm being productive. I'm checking email. But if it's not what you plan to do in advance, it's just as much of a distraction, even worse of a distraction than going on TikTok or playing Candy Crush. Because when you're on TikTok at work, you know you're not supposed to be doing that, right? Right? If you're playing a video game, that's clearly probably not your job. But if I'm checking email, ooh, I convince myself I'm being productive. But that's a lie. If it's not what you plan to do, it is just as much of a distraction. But the problem is it's tricked you into prioritizing the urgent and the easy work at the expense of the hard and important work you have to do to move your life and career forward. So just because it's a work-related task doesn't mean it's not a distraction. That's the most dangerous kind of distraction, because you don't even realize you've been fooled. Okay, so now we have traction and distraction. Now I can get to your question. Sorry, I had to frame the model. You asked about internal triggers versus external triggers. Now, most people, when they think about distraction, they think about external triggers. The pings, the dings, the rings, all of these things in our outside environment that can lead us towards distraction, right? That's what we tend to blame. Our phones, our kids, our boss, our girlfriend, the stuff outside of us, okay? Those are external triggers, and they do definitely distract us. But would you believe studies have found that only about 10% of the time that you check your phone, are you checking your phone because of an external trigger? So only 10% of the time is it because of a ping, ring, or ding. Well, what's the other 90% of the time? Turns out 90% of the time, 90% of the time that we check our phone, it's not because of what's happening outside of us. It's not because of a ping, ding, or ring. It's because of what's happening inside of us. This is called an internal trigger. What is an internal trigger? An internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety. These are uncomfortable sensations that we don't like to feel. And we will turn to the easiest, the quickest, the most satisfying solution to take our mind off of that discomfort. Okay? So 90% of our distractions don't come from our phone, they come from inside our own brains. So that's where we have to start. That's the most important step. You can get all the tips and tricks and life hacks and bullshit apps and all that crap. None of it will work. None of it will work unless you understand the discomfort you are trying to escape. Because if it's too much news, too much booze, too much Facebook, too much football, it doesn't matter. You will always find a distraction unless you know what you are trying to escape from. What is that uncomfortable sensation that you don't know how to deal with in a healthy way, so you deal with it in a harmful way? So that's the first step, mastering internal triggers, or they will become your master.
So you're saying distraction comes from avoiding uncomfortable emotions. And how can I recognize these moments and redirect them toward traction instead of distraction?
Yeah. So that's the very first step, mastering these internal triggers. The very first step is recognizing that's the case, right? So stop blaming your phone. Stop it. It's not your phone. It's a feeling. That is actually, it sounds silly, but the more we say, oh, Mark Zuckerberg is doing this to me, and the phone, and this and that, we blame all this stuff outside of me. And or even worse, we start saying somehow I'm broken. Oh, it's my ADHD brain. It's I'm addicted to the device. We start saying all these things that lead to what's called learned helplessness. That if you believe you can't do something, you're right. So the most important thing I can give folks, even if you don't believe anything else I say, even if you don't use any of these techniques, if you understand that you will always be powerless to change your lot in life, if you believe you are powerless. So if you believe these things have control over you, you're right. You're addicted, you're controlled. But if you believe, wait a minute, there's something I can do, and you do something about it, now you realize, actually, it's not that hard. So what do I do? All you have to do is to have a set of tools ready, a skill set, a toolbox that when you feel that discomfort, instead of going for the drink, for the cigarette, for the scroll, for the remote control, whatever it is that you're looking to escape that discomfort, you need to learn this new skill of doing a different behavior to satisfy that discomfort. And don't feel bad about it. There's no shame here. None of us were taught how to do that, right? There's no class in school, at least not the school I went to, that taught me how do I deal with uncomfortable emotions in a healthy way. So it's a skill like any other. There's nothing broken about your brain. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just that you haven't learned this skill. So what you need to do is to, and I give over a dozen different techniques in the book just about how to deal with these internal triggers. What you have to do is to learn to deal with that discomfort in a healthy way and use it to like rocket fuel to propel you towards traction rather than trying to escape it with distraction. So number one is recognizing the sensation. If you can just note that sensation of, you know what? I really feel like checking Instagram right now. Why? What's going on? Do I really need Instagram? No, nothing's going to happen if I don't check email or Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever. Nothing's going to happen, right? It's all in my head. What am I feeling right now? Is it loneliness? Is it boredom? Is it fatigue? Just recognizing that that is the true source of the problem, you're already ahead of the game, okay? The next step is to have a series of tools ready to go. So I'll tell you, for example, some of my tools. So I've been a professional author and speaker for well over a decade. And every day that I write, let me tell you, it happens every day, literally. It happened today. I'm working on my third book. And every day that I write, all I want to do is something else. Right? I want to go check the news. I want to look at stock prices. I want to look at sports scores. I want to look at email. I want to do, this is a big one, research. I need to Google something real quick. Or let me ask ChatGPT something because, I need to do more research. Really what I'm doing is escaping the hard work of writing. Writing sucks. It's really hard and it never gets easier. So what I do, a practice that I use, this is just one of over a dozen that I put in the book, but this is one of them, is called the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule says that you can give in to any distraction, whether it's eating that piece of chocolate cake, even though you're on a diet, whether it's smoking that cigarette, even though you're trying to quit, whether it's checking your device when you really should be focused on that big project, whatever it is, you can do it. You're an adult, you can do whatever you want, but not right now. You'll do it in 10 minutes. That's why it's called the 10-minute rule. You can do it in 10 minutes, okay? And for those 10 minutes, here's your job. You set a timer. So I use my Apple Watch and I set a timer for 10 minutes. And now you have a choice to make. You can get back to the task at hand whenever you're ready, okay? Or your job is to simply surf the urge, okay? And this is just one technique. That I've tried many. You should try many to see what fits you best. But this is one of the techniques that fits me best, is surfing the urge. Because what most people don't realize is that you don't control your emotions. You don't control your emotions. It's not your fault that you had the urge to check your phone. You don't control those urges. Do you control the urge to sneeze? No. When you feel the urge to sneeze, that's unconscious, right? You already felt, you can't control the urge to sneeze. All you can do is choose how you will respond to that urge, right? So you take out a tissue and you cover your nose because that's the responsible thing to do. So the only choice you have in the matter is how you will respond to that urge to check your phone, to smoke the cigarette, to eat the chocolate cake, whatever the case might be. You only have the choice of how you will respond, okay? So you have to choose that. You have to be a claimer, not a blamer or a shamer, but a claimer who claims responsibility over those actions. And so what you want to do is to realize that these urges that you don't control, they don't last. Most people don't realize that. When you feel bored, you feel like, I'm always going to feel bored. This is never going to end. When I'm angry, when I'm lonely, when I'm indecisive, when I'm uncertain, I feel like I'm always going to feel that way. But that's never the case. But our brain tricks us into thinking it's always going to be the case. So your job for those 10 minutes is to just surf that urge like a surfer on a surfboard. And so there's many different techniques you can use to learn this practice. One thing that I do is that I repeat a mantra. So for those 10 minutes, I just take a deep breath. I just stop for a minute. And I tell myself, this is what it feels like to get better. This is what it feels like to get better. Now, that's my mantra. You can steal it. You can make up your own. Doesn't really matter. But what I do is I remind myself that discomfort is normal. We have somehow told people that they're always supposed to be happy, that we're always supposed to feel good, that nothing is ever supposed to be uncomfortable. Well, everything worth having in life is on the other side of uncomfortable. So relish in that discomfort, enjoy the discomfort, learn to say, wow, I feel bored because this is hard and most people won't do this. That's what makes me special, right? So you learn to refocus that, reframe it, reimagine that internal trigger as a good thing. It's good that I'm feeling bored because that means that when other people feel bored, they're going to quit. I'm not going to quit. So by doing that, what you will find is maybe after 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes, you'll be back at the task at hand. Okay? And so over time, that 10-minute rule becomes 12 minutes, becomes 15 minutes, becomes 20 minutes. And all of a sudden you wake up and you say, wait a minute, I can do this. These things don't control me. I control them.
You mentioned in the book, time blocking is a key principle. And for someone who's new to this concept, what is the most practical way to get started and how they can ensure they stick to their schedule amidst competing priorities?
Yeah, sure. So step number one, master internal triggers. So you've got to have a toolbox. We talked about the 10-minute rule, surfing the urge. There's a dozen other different techniques that you should learn so that you could try out what works for you. And sometimes in different phases of your life, different techniques will work. And for different people, different techniques will work. So I give you a menu, a smorgasbord of different techniques you should use. But again, that is the most important phase. So everything else we're going to talk about is less important. If you don't first figure out what to do with those emotions, nothing else is going to work. Okay? But assuming that you have tools in place, practices, that you know what you will do when you feel that discomfort, now it's time to move to step two. Step two, and of course, to learn about all this stuff, it's all in Indistractable. So step two is about making time for traction. Okay? We talked about traction and distraction. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things that move you closer to your values. So we have to start by asking, what are values? Okay? Values are attributes of the person you want to become. Values are attributes of the person you want to become. But most people, when I ask them, what got in your way? Okay, what distracted you from what you wanted to do, from becoming the kind of person you want to become? They can't tell me, right? And I say, show me your calendar. What was it that you planned to do with your time? Typically, their calendars are blank. They have to-do lists, which are a mile long. We could talk about why to-do lists are awful for your productivity. But when you look at somebody's calendar, typically, they've got a dentist appointment or a meeting, but most of their time is just blank. And if your calendar is blank, what the hell are you complaining about? You have no right to say you got distracted unless you know what you got distracted from. I'm going to say that again. This is super important. You cannot say you got distracted unless you know what you got distracted from. So if you don't plan your day, everything is a distraction. Okay? Now, some of you are going to think, wow, this guy wants me to plan every minute of my day. Wow, that's so rigid, and I can't do that. I've got kids. I've got clients. I'm in the service business. I'm on a distributed team. I have international colleagues. I can't do that. I've heard every excuse in the book, and they're all goddamn excuses. You absolutely can time box. And in fact, if you're not time boxing, you're not a professional. You're an amateur. And frankly, if you're living the kind of life you want, if you're all hunky-dory, you're listening to the wrong podcast. Don't read my book. But if you're like I used to be, where I knew I was capable of more, I knew I could be in better shape, I knew I could be a better father, I knew I could be a better husband, I knew I could be better at my work, if I could just focus on what I knew I needed to do, I could live up to my full potential. If you're like that, this technique is for you. Starting with planning out, how do you want to spend your time? If you want to look back on your life, like 99% of the people do, and say, I should have done things differently. I should have been with my kids more. I should have started that business. I should have written that book. I should have done this and done that. If you don't want to be like 99% of people who live with regret, you have got to plan your days. This is the only way to not live with regret, is to say, here's how I want to spend my time according to my values, not someone else's. Okay? And you do that by time boxing. And I give you 3 life domains to fill out. The first is you. If you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people, you can't make the world a better place. So how would the person you want to become spend time taking care of themselves? Okay? And I'm not going to tell you how to spend your time. I don't care. It's up to you. But if health is important, do you care about your health? If that's one of your values, to be a person who values their health, who takes care of their body, who wants to live a long, healthy, productive life, you have to plan time for things like exercise, a bedtime. You know, my daughter, I used to yell at her and say, it's time for your bedtime. Why are you still awake? And she said one day, Daddy, do you have a bedtime? She was absolutely right. I didn't have a bedtime. Now I have a bedtime because I know rest is important. If you say, oh, being an educated person is important, that's an attribute of the person I want to become. Well, do you have time to read in your day? Is that part of your daily schedule? If it's important to you, I'm not saying it has to be, but if it's important, you have to put that in your schedule. Then your relationships. Do you give time to the people you love, whatever scraps of time are left over, right? For years, my wife and I were like ships in the night, right? We were kind of like roommates because we didn't make time for each other. My best friends, I started losing contact with my best friends because they were in different parts of the world and we didn't make time for each other. Well, that's completely changed. I have time in my calendar. My wife and I go on a long walk every Sunday morning. We go on a date every Friday. I have time to call my best friends. It's on the calendar. It's held in the calendar forever and ever. We don't have to send email back and forth saying, can you do this date? Can you do this date? Nope, it's in the schedule. So making time for those important relationships. And then finally, when it comes to your work domain, that's the last life domain. Now, work can be split up into two life domains. We have what's called reactive work, and we have what's called reflective work. That makes up our 100% of our work time. Reactive work is how most people spend their day. Reacting to emails, reacting to notification, reacting to taps on the shoulder from their boss. That's reactive work, and that's part of everyone's day. I understand many of our jobs, to some degree or another, we have to be reactive to what other people need of us. But if you are spending your entire day doing reactive work, you're lazy. You're being lazy, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a kind of work that can only be done without distraction. And that kind of work is called reflective work. Reflective work is strategizing, planning, thinking can only be done without distraction. So what happens is for most knowledge workers, they don't want to think, right? Look around, look at your colleagues, look at your boss, look at, people you work with. They don't want to think. They want to be told what to do all day. And so they take comfort in saying, what should I do right now? Oh, I know. Let me check email. Email will tell me what to do. What the hell? Email is going to tell you what? That's ridiculous. But we do this all the time. I don't know what to do with my time right now. Well, somebody tell me, as opposed to, wait a minute, let's sit down. What's actually important for me to do? You have to plan the time to think, which is why you have to plan time for reflective work time. And it could be 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour. It doesn't actually matter how much time you put for reflective work time. Of course, if you have the kind of job that requires a lot of strategizing, planning, thinking, you're going to need much more of that reflective work time to work with that distraction. But if you're not at least planning some time in your day and all you're doing all day long is reacting to other people, I promise you, you're running real fast in the wrong direction. So you've got to make some time for reflective work time. So if you do that, right, if you look at those three life domains and you plan out your week, and if that's too much, plan out a day, and if that's too much, just do a weekend day. Once you see what that looks like, if you just try one day of planning out your day and trying your best to do what you say you're going to do, you will experience the bliss, the joy that so few people out there have actually experienced of living a day the way I said I would. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I know people are saying, well, how can I do that? My kids need me and my boss needs me. I'm telling you, there's a strategy around all this stuff. And we can talk about exactly how to do that. But that's big picture, the tactics for turning your values into time by making time for traction.
I would love to dive more into the strategy. But personally, I get very obsessive when I'm working on a new project and all of my relationship go by the wayside. I stop going to the gym. I stop sleeping for the 3-4 months. Then I crash. So you're telling me the problem is that I need to go and have a clear idea about what are my values is.
So I have no problem with how you want to spend your time, right? And I understand that for many people, they are at their best when they give it 110%. I am that kind of person as well. Look, I started 2 tech companies. I know you have to really grind sometimes. So I'm not telling you how to spend your time. I'm not saying you need balance. No, if you don't want balance, you don't need balance. Your mistake is that you're trying to have it all at the same time. So Mahmoud, you can do it all. You can do it all and you can have it all, just not at the same time. So the mistake you're making is to regret the fact that you wanted to spend time with your girlfriend, that you told your girlfriend you would spend time with her, and you didn't. You should have said, hey, babe, for the next month, I'm in my cave, okay? I've got a big project I want to work on, and you're not going to see me. And I want to be honest with you about that because here's my calendar for the week ahead. And for right now, I really need to focus on this thing that's really important to me and my values, okay? I'm not saying she's going to be okay with that. She might not be okay with that, and that's for you to deal with, right? But the mistake that people make is that they try and tell everybody, oh, everybody's going to get all of me all the time. Like there's a clone of you somewhere. And that's unrealistic. So if it's something you want to do 100%, do it 100%. But if you do want balance, if you do say, okay, look, I need time to take care of my body. So I need time for the gym. I need time for my relationships. I need time for myself, whatever the case might be. To do that, you have to do it in advance. You have to think about it in advance. Okay, so it's not that I'm telling you what to do with your time. It's that I'm telling you to be intentional about what you want to do with your time ahead of time.
Oh man, it hits so close home because for the past 3 months I've been very focused on this topic, and I try to be there to everyone, my friend, my girlfriend, my family, and eventually I, it all come crashing down. And my girlfriend sat me down and told me, Mahmoud, you should have told me that. Give me this time, give me a disclaimer at least. I would have. She would have been upset, but she'd have known what's happening. And I try to do it all. I'm the hero
Right.
here.
And this is, by the way, the reason this resonates with you, the words coming out of my mouth, is because I have been there. Right? Like I wrote this book for me. It took me 5 years to write this book. You know why, Mahmoud? Because I kept getting distracted. It wasn't until I learned these techniques, it wasn't until I did the research and I started using this stuff in my life that I changed my life. So now I'm indistractable. But I wrote the book for me because I was having these problems. I was having the fights with my wife. I was having exactly these type of dilemmas, right? So I've been there before. So what I learned was it's that people want to be in relationships with people who have integrity. People want to do business with people who do as they say. People want to be friends with people who don't flake and show up, right? We don't actually expect, people don't expect others to be there all the time and everywhere. That's annoying, right? Like that's desperate. You don't, that friend that's always available, like that's too much, right? What they want is to know when Mahmoud says he's going to be there, he's going to be there. And he's not going to be looking at his phone and he's not going to be late. He's going to be there when he says he's there. That's the kind of person people like to do business with, like to be in relationships with, like to be friends with, is a person who has personal integrity. Okay. And so it starts with being honest with ourselves, right? Because we want to be honest with other people. We would never want to be called a liar. That's a terrible put down to be called by someone else to be a liar. But we lie to ourselves all the time. We say, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, but I don't. I'm going to eat right. Oh, I'll start tomorrow, right? I'm going to work on that big project, but we procrastinate. So that's where it starts. It starts by being honest with ourselves. The problem is we think we can do everything all at once, as opposed to when you use a time box calendar, as opposed to a to-do list. By the way, this is why to-do lists suck, because to-do lists have no constraints, right? This idea of a to-do list as a personal productivity technique, awful, terrible. Don't do it. Why? Because a to-do list, you can always add more, right? Where is the bottom of the to-do list, right? If you need more space, just flip the page or put it in an app, right? The app will never tell you, hey, Mahmoud, you're never going to get this stuff done. But a calendar, you only have 24 hours in the day. That's all you get. And whether you're Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, it doesn't matter. You can't make more time. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. So we should be cheap with our time and generous with our money because we can't make more time. We can only make more money. So what that forces you to do is to plan time to work on a project. Now, this is super, super important. Okay, I want to make sure I emphasize this. The goal of a time box calendar is not to finish. Okay, it's not to finish. People get this wrong all the time. They'll say, hey, Nir, what happens if I put something in my calendar and I didn't have enough time? Right? I worked on this project. I time boxed an hour. I didn't get it done. Right? Shouldn't I then expand the time box to finish? Absolutely not. No, that is not the point of a time box calendar because they're thinking like to-do list minds. Okay, to-do list people love checking boxes. Right? I got to be honest with you, Mahmoud. This happened to me all the time. I would finish something, okay, and then I would write it on my to-do list just so I can get the joy of checking it off. how, how, right? It feels so good, but how stupid is that, right? We get this pleasure from checking stupid little boxes. That doesn't matter because what do? We do the easy stuff, right? We do the fun stuff. We don't do the hard work we have to do. So rather than checking off cute little boxes and saying, oh, look, I'm being so productive, even though we're working on the wrong stuff, what we have to do is measure ourselves by one thing and one thing only. And that one thing is, did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? That's it. It's not about did I finish. It's did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction. Why is that important? Because the only way to know how long things take you is to measure your output per minute. So that's the problem with to-do lists. People put on their to-do list, finish my book, finish the presentation, write a blog post, right? Like these super big lofty goals, and they have no clue how long those things take. That's why we have, on average, we know the statistics, there's been studies that find that statistically, it takes people 3 times longer to finish a project than they estimate. 3 times longer, okay? So rather what you want, why is that? Because you know how it is. Like, oh, you start working on that project, and then, oh, you know what? I really could use a cup of coffee. And then, oh, there's Janet. Yo, Janet, I haven't seen you in a while. How's it going, Janet? So you start talking, and then you get back to your desk. Oh, let me just check email for a minute. Wait, what was I working on again? Oh, I totally forgot. So you have no clue how long it actually takes you to finish anything. Rather, when you use a time box calendar, you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to work on this presentation. I got to do 30 slides for my big presentation, and I'm going to work on it for 30 minutes. But that's all I'm going to work on. I'm just going to focus on this one thing, nothing else, for 30 minutes. Then, at the end of 30 minutes, you say, okay, I worked on it for 30 minutes. I didn't get interrupted even once. I didn't check email. I only worked on the presentation. And would you look at that? In 30 minutes, I finished 3 slides. Okay. Well, to finish the entire presentation, I'm going to need 9 more time boxes to finish the presentation. A to-do list never gives you that. So it's only by time boxing that you can freaking figure out how long things actually take you to finish.
So let's say you told me that we're gonna give me strategies to manage all of this. I wanna go to my boxing classes, I wanna sleep early, and I want to have a healthy relationship because I think my girlfriend is right. We should have at least one date night per week. And I want to be very effective in my job. My team depends on me. I want to scale my startup in the next 2 years. How can I do all of this at the same time?
Yeah. So you look at your calendar, okay? You take out your schedule for the week ahead, and you say, how would the person I want to become spend their time? Okay? If you want all these things, which you can have the business, you can have the girlfriend, you can have the boxing, fitness, you can have all this stuff. You just can't do it all at once. So you're going to take out your calendar for the week ahead, and you're going to say, how much time would the person I want to become spend on these various things? So first start with you. Okay. So let's say fitness is important, boxing class. Okay. When is that boxing class? Okay. Don't say, oh, I'm going to go sometime today. No, put it in the calendar. And don't forget to include time to get there, of course, right? And maybe even traffic. So buffer some time so that you know you're planning accordingly. So put that in the calendar. Put in, your bedtime, all the other things that you need to do to take care of yourself. If you like to watch Netflix and play video games, put that in your calendar too. I want you to put that in your calendar, okay? Because it's not realistic to think, oh, does the person you want to become never spend time playing video games or whatever it is? No, if you like those things, put it in your calendar. Be realistic. So put those things in your calendar. Then your relationships. So, depending on the most important relationships in your life, time with your friends, time with your parents, time with your significant other, your girlfriend, doesn't matter. Put that time in your schedule. And then discuss that with her, right? So how much time does the person you want to become, if that's part of your values, spend with their girlfriend, okay? And say, hey, honey, I really want to make sure that we have time with each other. I don't want us to just, grab a quick meal in between me checking email. I want to make sure that we have quality time when I can put away my phone, and I expect her, you to do the same, when we can actually have a good time, when we can actually have a date and, remember why we're in this relationship in the first place. It's because we enjoy each other's company, okay? And then put in the work time of how much time with the person you want to become in order to reach your goals, in order to live out your values of being an entrepreneur, being a podcaster. How much time would that take? So that you know in advance what that looks like. Now, you're never going to get it right the first time, or the second, or the third, or the 10th time, okay? It's not that you never fall off track. There will be times when you fall off track. Invariably, I still fall off track from time to time. But now I know what is traction and what is distraction. So now when I do fall off track, I know why, okay? Paulo Coelho has a wonderful quote. He said, a mistake repeated more than once is a decision. Right? Isn't that a great quote? A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. So the difference between a distractible person and an indistractable person is that a distractible person keeps getting distracted by the same things again and again. Oh, honey, I was late for work again. Oh, I got distracted by YouTube again. Oh, it was Instagram. It was this. It was my kids. It was my boss. Again, if it gets you once, fine. Okay, but if it happens again and again and again, you are deciding to be distractible. An indistractable person says, okay, I see what you did there, distraction. You got me that one time, but you're not going to get me again. Why? Because every distraction only has three possible sources: an internal trigger, right, that uncomfortable feeling, an external trigger, or a planning problem. That's it. There's only three reasons for every distraction. So now I can look at my schedule and say, okay, here's what I plan to do. And for one reason or another, I did something else. I got distracted. How do I make plans today to not let that happen tomorrow? So maybe it's, you know what, I really don't like taking boxing classes first thing in the morning. It's hard for me to wake up. I'm going to take an evening boxing class. And I think I'm going to be more likely to attend that class. Or, you know what, I spent way too much time in meetings this week and not enough time at my desk. Or I spent, whatever it might be. You can always adjust the calendar for the day ahead. You can never adjust it for the day. Okay, once you start your day, it's locked and loaded. Okay, it's like a cannon. It's ready to go. Okay, but for tomorrow, you can change it because that day hasn't started. So if you say, you know what, ooh, that project, I'm a little bit behind. I'm going to need some more time tomorrow or the next day or the next day. That's fine. You can always change your calendar to make it easier to follow day to day and week to week. Okay, so that now, now that I've been doing this for a few years, my calendar, it takes me maybe 15 minutes a week, not even that, sometimes maybe even 5 minutes, because it's pretty much the same from week to week. Of course, I change it. We had this phone call, so I had to move things and, sometimes rearrange. But now that I'm doing that once a week, maybe it takes me 5-10 minutes, and I know what my week ahead looks like. So I always know what is traction and what is distraction.
The reason why this YouTube channel became popular and this podcast is because early on I used one trick in your book, which is effort packs, and I post a video every week. And if I was late like one a day, I feel very guilty. Can you talk a little bit more about effort packs and how we can use them effectively to stay focused?
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so step number one, just to review, master internal triggers. Step number two, make time for traction. Step number three, which we're skipping, is hack back the external triggers, which we can come back to. Even though they only make up 10% of our distractions, the pings, the dings, the rings, emails, meetings, all these things we can talk about. That's step number three. Step number four is to prevent distraction with pacts. A pact is a pre-commitment device. It's when we decide in advance how we will keep ourselves locked in and make sure we don't let ourselves get distracted. There are different kinds of pacts. There's a price pact, an effort pact, an identity pact, a social pact, different kinds of pacts. And what you're talking about is an effort pact, where what we do is we put some bit of work in between us and the thing we don't want to do. Okay. So whenever we do that, we're essentially saying, okay, the cost of me getting distracted is the extra effort of getting distracted. So for example, when I write, I'll use an app that eliminates certain websites. Okay, so if I by mistake go check email, it says, "Oh, nope, you can't. It's blocked." It's an app called Cold Turkey, right? Now, could I find a way around it? Of course I could, but now it's extra effort. I don't really feel like doing that. So okay, let me get back to the thing I said I was going to do. So that's an effort pact. There's also a price pact where you say, hey, if you don't do something, there's some kind of financial disincentive. So in order for me to finish my book, when I learned this technique, I called my buddy Mark and I said, hey, Mark, if I don't turn in this manuscript by January 1st, by my deadline, I'm going to pay you $10,000. Do you think I paid him the $10,000? Of course not. I finished my manuscript and I kept my $10,000. And this is super important because so many people I hear, they just give up, right? Or they say like they just get, or they think they give up on their kids. Oh, my kid is so distracted, he won't stop playing Fortnite, or we won't get off TikTok, or whatever the case might be. They're just addicted. There's no way. I can't focus. I can't concentrate. I must have some kind of something broken about my brain. And I give them a simple test. I say, let me ask you something. If I were to pay you $10,000 today to study for an hour, to hit the gym, to we'll work on that big project, whatever the case might be. If I told you I'll give you $10,000 if you focus without distraction for an hour, could you do it? Of course. Oh, everybody can do it, right? No problem. I've met people with super ADHD, and even they can do it. No problem. So now we've both agreed you can. We're just negotiating the price. So can't needs to get out of your vocabulary. Maybe you don't want to, but you can. You just haven't had the right stakes. So that's an amazing tool that very few people will utilize, is to have accountability on demand. I mean, think about it. People will pay for a fitness coach to show up and make them exercise When if they just took that money and made a bet with somebody and said, if I don't go and exercise, I lose the money, right? It works actually. There's been many studies that show this, that help people quit smoking. To nicotine is so addictive, people can quit smoking this way. All kinds of things can happen to these price packs. Then there are social packs, which use some kind of a commitment. That sounds like what you did. You probably told your community, I'm going to post a video, and then they're going to, you were afraid of the social blowback if you didn't do that. So yeah, we can use these packs to hold us accountable. But one word of warning, that is a last line of defense. Okay? What some people do is they hear that technique and they immediately jump to it. And that's a big, big, big mistake. Why? Because some people, if they haven't done the other three steps first, if you haven't mastered internal triggers, made time for traction, hack back at the external triggers, and then jump to the pact, for some people, if it doesn't work, if they fail, and they fail publicly or they lose the money, they beat themselves up. They feel awful about it. And they say, oh, this doesn't work. I must be broken. There must be something wrong with me. They feel like crap. It's terrible. And they typically fail because they haven't done the other three steps first. You have to first figure out those emotions. Remember, you're always going to find an excuse to not do what you say you're going to do if you don't deal with that underlying emotional discomfort. If you don't plan the time for when you're going to do the thing, you're going to probably fail. If you don't remove the external triggers, you're going to probably fail. Then as the last line of defense, after you've done the other three steps, then you can start utilizing these pacts.
So I don't smoke. It's part of my identity. I'm not a smoker. I'm an early riser. It's part of my identity. I always wake up early. And you even mentioned in the book that being indistractable could be part of someone's identity as well. And what's a practical way can someone start reshaping their self-image to align with this goal?
Yeah, let's start with your girlfriend. Like literally, like saying, look, as part of my values, as part of, one of the things that is super important to me is to live with integrity. I want to be as honest with others as I am with myself and vice versa. And I want to be very honest with you, right? One of my values is to be a great boyfriend. That's important to me. Okay. And so why do I do that? Because I'm indistractable. So that means that if I say that we're going to have date night every Friday, I'm going to be there on time, ready to go, smelling good, ready to take you out. Okay? That also means that neither of us are going to use our phones when we're together because I'm indistractable. So just like I'm not going to light up a cigarette in our living room, I'm also not going to check the phone if what we really want to do is to be fully present with each other in body and mind. So that's just one example of how we can tell people, hey, this is who we are. This is part of my identity. And is it so different from someone who, dresses with a religious garb like a hijab? Is it so different from someone who's a vegetarian? We make accommodations. Okay, maybe it's, a little unusual, but what's wrong with saying, hey, that's who I am. It's part of my identity is to be indistractable.
I want to touch a little bit on your writing. Your books are very easy to read, and even someone can finish them in a weekend, and they're not very dense. And if you look to the resources section, they're always full with you reference a lot of studies. My question to you is, how can you go about them? And it takes years to create such books. Do you have a clear idea what you want to write, and then you start writing, or no? When you start to write, then you start discovering new stuff.
So for one, I love you. Because you appreciate that. Because the hardest part about writing a book is making it short. It's so easy to just blah, blah, blah. And we've all read these kind of books, right? They just go on and on and on because the publisher said, hey, we need a book that's 300 pages. So the author just writes and writes and writes and writes and doesn't think about how to make it clear. So I didn't want to write that kind of book. I wanted the kind of book that is, one, entertaining, right? That is interesting to read. That's not, super technical and jargony, but also is full of practical ideas. So everything in the book, not only does it work for me, I hate these books that you read that says, oh, I built a big company and it worked for me, so do exactly what I do. And that never works because you're not them, right? And you're not me. So I can't just tell you what works for me. I also have to back it up with peer-reviewed studies. So there's 30 pages of citations to peer-reviewed studies. So it's not just what works for me. It's also things that are backed by really good research that's done, that's been published in peer-reviewed journals. So to me, that's really important. I don't want the woo-woo stuff of chakras and, like whatever mumbo jumbo crystals and all that works for some people, but doesn't really hold up scientifically, it also has to hold up scientifically if it's going to make it into my book. But it needs to be simple but not simplistic, like that model: traction, distraction, internal triggers, external triggers. Everybody listening to this podcast can now think about distraction in that way, right? That these simple principles, like you can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. That the opposite of distraction is traction, and vice versa. Internal triggers, external triggers. That actually took me the longest time because the easiest thing is just stuff in more concepts and say, here, you figure it out, reader. I wanted to make it simple enough for the reader to remember and hopefully tell other people about it so that they can help others as well.
I mean, that's why when you mentioned that you're working on a third book, I'm extremely excited because I know whatever you work on, you work really hard to reduce complex ideas into a bite-sized bites that I can consume. But can I know what is this new book?
It's still in very early stages. It's going to be in general about beliefs, about the power of beliefs, because what bugged me was that I do these office hours, and anybody can sign up on my website to do 15 minutes with me. They can ask me any question they want, as long as they've read the book. And I have a little test to see if you've read the book. And as long as you read the book first and you have further questions, anyone can call me. You might have to wait a little bit, but you'll get time with me. And what I noticed was that every once in a while, like maybe one out of every 20 calls, somebody would call up and say, Nir, I read your book. I read Indistractable, and it didn't work. I'm still distracted. So, oh, okay. Well, tell me more. Like, this is really important. I want to know what did I miss? Why didn't it work? I'm really curious. What did you do for step one? How did you master these internal triggers? Nir, I didn't do step one. I skipped step one. Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. Okay. How about step two? Tell me, what did you do? How did you make time for traction? Yeah, I read that chapter and I didn't do it. So here I am. I spent 5 years writing this book to solve people's problems that they say, oh, technology is so bad. I can't focus. I need medications. I can't. I said, here's the answer on a silver platter. Here's 5 years of research. I'm giving you the answer to your problem. All it is in a $20 book. Here it is. Simple. Like, just do this and you will solve the problem. And they didn't do it. And so I wanted to figure out why. And I think the reason, I'm not exactly sure, I think the reason has to do with beliefs. I think that we have these self-limiting beliefs, and I want to try and figure out how we can crack those self-limiting beliefs. Some people are just so busy convincing themselves they can't. And I see this everywhere. I see this from people who are unemployed. I see this from people who are partners at law firms who just are stuck in this I can't mentality to the point where they don't even try. And I'm trying to figure out, how do you break people from limiting beliefs?
Nir, your passion really comes through the screen. I love this interview. Again, I know we only scratched the surface and I have still so many questions, but where our audience can go and find more about how to create products that have the hook model, or how to be indistractable, or when they can learn more about you?
Sure. So you can subscribe at my website, nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name, so Nir and far.com. And if you go to nirandfar.com, you will also, if you go to indistractable.com, that's IN, the word distract, ABLE, distract, ABLE, indistractable.com. There's actually a free workbook that you can get there. Even if you don't read the book, you can actually use the workbook for free. And that's all available there on my website.